to our 30-second live Q&A on Gutenberg Times. It's a great way to connect with people who are using Gutenberg, and we have an excellent show today for you. My name is Birgit Pauli-Haack, and I'm the host of and the publisher of the Gutenberg Times. Thanks for joining, everybody. And with me is co-host Anne McCarthy, who's the WordPress product liaison. Howdy, Anne. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. I'm very excited to introduce how we're going to talk to folks in the Pew Research Center about how they use a mixture of core and custom blocks to streamline their publishing process and to create a lot of the stuff that you know and love from them, with their charts and quizzes and all that good stuff. So with me here today, Seth Rubenstein, lead developer, or Rubenstein, apologies, lead developer, and Michael Piccorossi, director of digital strategy. Thank you both so much for coming, Seth and Michael. Apologies if I completely ruined both your last names. And thank you so much for taking the time to just talk about all the cool stuff you're doing at the WordPress block editor. I know it's going to inspire a lot of folks. How are you both doing today? We'll start with Seth.
Oh, I'm doing fine. I am living in the middle of a post-home renovation construction zone, but other than that,
Amazing.
I'm doing great.
Minor details. Michael,
Yeah.
how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having us. We're really excited to talk about the work that we're doing and how we might help other people with what they're trying to do. So thanks.
Yeah, so I'm so happy. Totally thrilled. And I couldn't wait because we were talking about this since end of May and now it's end of June. I had to wait 2 months. But we do proper introduction in less than a minute, but I have a few housekeeping notes. So please use the chat feature to let us know where you are watching from. And then for the question process, for those who are watching on YouTube live stream, use the chat box next to the video player. For your questions, and here on Zoom, use the Q&A button on the bottom of the screen for your questions and the chat bubble to share your thoughts and comments. A little reminder, yes, please be kind, even if you disagree. This is a family-friendly endeavor. So before we head first into the behind-the-scenes tour, we are gonna get, I want to ask both of you to tell us briefly about your WordPress story and how long have you been using it? Seth first and then...
Sure, I'll go first. I mean, I've been using WordPress for, I don't know, 18 years or something like that now. I started using WordPress in college. I was kind of responsible for like all the schools, clubs and newspaper websites and all that stuff. So that's when I started to learn WordPress. And then I just went successively from one job to the next, building out different WordPress products. I think I built one of the first learning management systems in WordPress many years ago, kind of in my first job. And then I started at Pew in 2015, and they were doing some interesting stuff with WordPress and WordPress multi-site, and we just kind of went from there. And I'm excited to show you what we have built over the last couple of years.
Yeah. Well, it's a great career. So, and a lot of nonprofit, and the going from Drupal to WordPress must have been a major switch of culture as well. So, Michael, how about you? What is your
Yeah, I've been doing digital stuff for more than 20 years, more years than I like to admit sometimes. And prior to Pew Research, I managed a team at US News and World Report. We built a custom-based, Python-based CMS and e-commerce system that was back like in 2006. So I've been doing a lot of different content management things. And I started at Pew Research in 2009. When I got here, the center was, we had like 4 different CMSs, none of them WordPress, 2 .NET, a Drupal, custom PHP. So it was really kind of a mess. And one of my first hires after I got here was another person you may know from the WordPress community, Russell Heimlich. And he was our first web developer. And he really, he and I talked about where we should take this organization, and we decided that WordPress was the right way to go. So we ran, a custom hosted version out of a data center in Virginia for a while, and then Seth joined us, as he said, in 2015. For a couple of years, we were managing on our own AWS infrastructure, and then we moved over to WordPress VIP in 2018, and we've been really happy, working in that environment ever since. So we've really never been happier, and we're really committed to the platform.
I love this. This is very cool. I'm gonna later have a question, so just tuck this away for now, around why you chose WordPress, especially with what seems to be more of an emphasis on the data side of things. And I've read books about how, for humanity's sake, we need to find ways to preserve data for the long term. So I'm curious if that played into part of, like, for human knowledge sake, of what platform can we choose that will have the most longevity and sustainability into the future. So I'm kind of fascinated with that entire concept when it comes to this kind of work and research, but just tuck that away for later. I just had to mention it for now.
Sure.
Oh, Birgit, you're muted. Sorry.
To type some things. I apologize. Our chat was disabled for a few minutes here, and now you can all tell us where you're watching from. I'm sorry about that, but it seems to be that Zoom is changing their default settings all the time. And I had this set up. So, well, anyway, so Michael, so what do you exactly do at the Pew Research Center?
Sure. So me personally, I'm the director of digital strategy. It's really product and strategy. It's like, and like I said, I've been here for 13 years now. And so I oversee a larger team of 20 people. In addition to the web dev, I also oversee the design team, video, products, social, email, user experience, and audience measurement. So basically, I'm the chief cat herder. So I think we're similar to, like, a lot of news organizations. I really describe us as like we're news adjacent, like. So the work of the center is, if you're not familiar with it, we are a nonpartisan, non-advocacy, public opinion polling, demographic analysis, and a variety of other social science research. Historically, the roots of the center is in survey research and polling, but in the last 5 years, we've really made a strategic shift to seek new ways of measuring public opinion, and that facilitated us starting our data labs team. So they're doing data science and computational social science. So that's a new sort of area of research for us, and our core product is, as is baked into our name, is nonpartisan, non-advocacy research. So these authoritative data-driven reports, they're big things, they're multi-chapter, and those are still really, in many ways, one of our core products. But we also do shorter, but equally rigorous and authoritative, like data-rich blog posts and things like that. But the digital team here also, in addition to do all of the regular day-to-day publishing, we'll publish in a given year maybe 40 or 50, data-driven features based on center research, and they run the gamut from D3 visualizations to interactive maps, data lookup tools, essays, and quizzes. And I don't want to overlook, the fact that we'll publish about 2,500, like static charts in a given year. And it's really an important part of how we get our information out there. So shout out to our design team. I think they're the best in the business, and I think they do great stuff. So it just doesn't have to be, interactive to be important to us. And I think in general, like, one of our real special sauce for these features that we do is allowing users to see themselves in our data. So Anne mentioned some of our quizzes and things like that. That's really, in terms of broad reach, we know that for the public, that's what they want to see. So that's it. So like I said, yeah, so we are really similar to a news organization, and we're involved in a lot of the same communities as news orgs, Online News Association, NICAR, the News Product Alliance. Those are sort of the people we hang out with. And like, as in addition to be a pointy headed middle manager, I'm really like a product guy at heart, and so I really do spend a lot of time in WordPress. So that's my story.
Right. Well, thank you, Michael. I had no idea about the full scope of the Pew Research Center. I only have been an avid reader of the internet research, since the early 90s, I think. because that's that was the one research where you knew who's online and who's online where, and especially then with the advent of user-generated content, social media, it was really nice. It was the one authority about internet usage, especially in America. So I'm really happy that I know now more about it. So Seth, what do you do at Pew Research Center?
Well, I am the lead developer. So when I started at Pew, there were a few developers, but there wasn't kind of like a defined dev team, and there wasn't kind of like modern dev team practices. So a lot of the challenge was getting that spun up in the first couple of years. And now we have 3 other developers beside myself. We have 2 developers that kind of focus on these digital features that Michael alluded to: maps, interactives. We call them scrolly telly interactives. You scroll through and different things happen. And then another developer and myself, we manage the majority of the WordPress app, and especially now the Gutenberg infrastructure. Yeah,
and I just want to go through the chat. Hi to Washington. DC, Russia Heinrich is here. No, nice, wonderful. Bud is here. Hi, Bud. Henrietta, Matt, Anne is also in the chat. And thank you for greeting everybody. So the genesis of this live Q&A is actually that I around the WordPress 6.0 release, Seth tweeted the following: "For all its naysayers, Gutenberg is a game changer for digital news apps. It's a force multiplier for your team." And we've spent about the last 3 years going all in block development. And then in the thread, you shared quite a few videos of examples, and it was really interesting. And I jumped at it and kind of DM'd you if you would come, you and your team come on the show. So, so what is it that you're going to show us today?
Sure. So I have a couple of examples from that kind of thread. So I think we'll dive in and I'll show you how we can build out home pages. That's one thing. How we are using Gutenberg in a quasi full site editing method to edit taxonomy archive pages, as well as a couple examples of how we build out digital features like quizzes, like charts, and interactives now. Some of these scrolly telly things I've told you about. We also have this other kind of concept of a quote sorter where we get quotes from the public and we sort them into different groups and things, and so you can browse that kind of information. We have the ability, we've just kind of created the ability for this, and it's not launched yet, to build those out in Gutenberg. So let me share my screen here.
Yeah, that would be lovely. And to the audience, if you have questions, just put it in the chat, and after the demo, Anne and I get the privilege of first questions, and then we'll go through your questions and see how and have Seth and Michael answer them.
Sure.
Go ahead, Seth.
So, the first thing that you see when you hit pewresearch.org is this page here. In the past, this might have been something built out with God knows how many short codes, if that was even possible at all. So now, and I'll just I have a couple tabs lined up here. Now it's very simple for an editor to come in and build out a homepage, especially with things like block patterns. We've kind of established some of these basic sections of the homepage that you can kind of just drag and drop in. So let's see, I'll just throw one together real quick. And maybe we'll do that. So the first block that we built in kind of our journey on Gutenberg was what we call a story item block. It's definitely our most used block. It's our most kind of custom, most developed out block. And with it, you can just drop in a story. And we have a couple different variations. We're using block variations throughout our block library for kind of quick shortcuts.
So cool you're using variations for this. I just have to say, I'm already seeing the pieces. I'm like, this is amazing.
Yeah. And using WordPress REST API and all of the WordPress components to build these sort of things out. So let me just type in a post, and I'm running this on my local dev, so it will be a little bit slower. And an editor can just search for a post, or they can drop in either a live link, or another feature that they requested, which I think has come in handy, is the edit URL for like an article that's not been published yet. So we can go try to grab some information about that. And then once in here, this block is using block context as well. We have found block context to be extremely important to our efforts to kind of guide producers into how things should be set up and set restrictions on how things should work. So for example, we have our own grid block as well. If I were redoing it today, I probably would stick with the core column blocks, but this was years ago. There were kind of some features and stuff, and we didn't know how to tap into core blocks the way we do now. So we just went through and made our own grid block. The column block passes down through block context the width of the column, so that, for example, a story item block, when you're choosing the image position, can say, oh, you can't do left or right position because this column is not large enough. So this is great because this makes sure that, once again, I go back to shortcodes because this is how it used to be. You know, with shortcodes, you really could place those kind of restrictions on the interface that maybe had to happen on the back end, and an editor would go and drop in a shortcode and they, well, this doesn't look like the way I wanted it to look, right? I didn't know about these restrictions. So now an editor can come in here and do all this visually. They could set an image size, enable different features like kind of bulleted items underneath here. They can include links in here, you know, whatever. Then we are also using the query block. This is one of our more recent kind of core block modifications. And I'll actually get rid of this to show you how that works. So you can drop in a query block, and we are registering through the block API our own variation here. You know, we've got all the basic query block things, but we've added our own thing, which will drop in the default settings for the story item block. And this, I think, also kind of alludes to what I was describing, that thread of our block first approach. Everything is a block in the site, or at least everything's moving in that direction to be a block in the site. To give you an idea of what that looks like, let me just save this real quick. Another important thing, and probably the most important thing about Gutenberg, is the fact that, you know, what you build here, hopefully, is how it's going to look on the front end. We're still dealing with some typography stuff, and I think when we go all in a full site editing, that'll be more one-to-one. But now, if I come over to our new homepage, come on. You know, what I've built out here is exactly as you're going to see it on the front end. So there should be no, you know, mistakes. There should be no, oh, this doesn't look like how I thought it was going to look like. All that stuff is visible in the back end. And on the front end here, you know, in the query block, obviously, I'm sure most people aren't aware kind of the nuts and bolts on how the query block works, but on the back end, obviously, there's a block called post template block, and that is rendering out your blocks using PHP on the back end. This is a story item block, basically being rendered out in PHP on the back end. These aren't actually, you know, static blocks. These are dynamic. So the query block gets the information. It says, you know, here's a post type we want to query, and then it outputs all that using the story item block as a template. So that's home pages. I think the other thing I wanted to dive into was the taxonomy pages. So where do I have that? So this is an example of a taxonomy page for us, our most important taxonomy topic.
So, sorry, but so what I'm hearing is that you are actually way ahead of the Gutenberg team. Yeah, build all the query blocks and templates all before it actually went to the plugin. That's totally right.
Did build out our own query block originally because when we first started looking at doing query blocks in places, the query block did not have taxonomy support, or at least very, very minimal taxonomy support. That's since changed, so we have now moved over to the core query block. But there were a lot of cases where we had to build out stuff before it was ready in Gutenberg, and then come back later and figure out if we were going to use the core block that Gutenberg had kind of built out. And in most cases, we do end up going with whatever the core block is. So this is kind of, I think, our best example of our approach to full site editing before we got full site editing. So this is your standard taxonomy archive page. But we have kind of two positions. One we call menu, and the other we call top. Well, actually, we have another one at the bottom called bottom. And these link up to a post type that we're calling taxonomy block area, which is not super creative, but it describes what it does. And there's a taxonomy for that, for location, menu, top, bottom. So you can go into here and you can say edit the menu, edit the top, whatever. And just like on the homepage, you can build out these kind of featured content areas in Gutenberg using whatever block you want, in this case, story item. We also have a promo block. We built out our own MailChimp block. And that's what you get.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to add, yes. So last summer, we launched a site redesign with a whole new information architecture and a multi-level content taxonomy. And as Seth pointed out, these topic pages were really the central component of that entire redesign. And being able to manage these in the ways that he's discussing has really been transformational for us. And one of the things I like is the ability to, you can create one of these topic blocks and assign it to multiple pages if they're the same, and it also, and we can also create these pages in a very short period of time, like literally in minutes. Usually it's more the editorial decisions that take longer than any of the actual production stuff. So
yeah. The other nice thing is that you can schedule these, because we are ostensibly a news site. I think Michael alluded to, kind of like to think of ourselves as kind of being a resource for the news rather than being an actual news service. But we post things that are on the topics of the day, and so we can change these. We can schedule changes out. We can schedule tomorrow's homepage. We can schedule next week's big release of some report we have. We can schedule the topic page changes that'll happen for that, because this is just a post type to us. So we just create a new post, slot it into this topic in the top location, and schedule it for next Wednesday to publish at 10 a.m. And this will change at 10 a.m. So that's also, I think, been a really great feature. And that of course applies to homepages and any of these kind of full site editing things that we're doing. And then the other thing is this is one of the things that we're going to have to struggle with in the next couple of months, is we also built out our own navigation block. And when I say we built out, we forked the early efforts of the Gutenberg team's navigation block, and we kind of went a little bit further with how we needed it to work. A lot of that changes was kind of making these different menu links that would point to topic pages specifically and stuff like this, and the ability to have like a sub menu and that would follow our CSS and stuff like that. So that's taxonomy pages. That's kind of full site editing. The other thing I wanted to show was quizzes. We might not have enough time to show off some of these other interactives, but the quizzes stuff, this we launched last fall in order to support what is by far our most popular product. I mean, it blows our analytics out of the water every year, and that is our political typology quiz. It's definitely one of our complex interactives too. If you haven't taken this, you should. It's pretty fun. People enjoy it.
I've taken this with friends, at a
yeah.
bar years ago. We were like, let's all take the quiz and talk about it. Yeah, this is really cool.
And we have a group feature too. So if you sign up for an account on our website, you get a little login, and you can go create your own little community group. So you can say, here's how this group of people is responding to this, which is fun. So here's what it looks like. Go through, you ask questions, you answer them, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Before we were using gravity forms for this. Before that, there was a completely homegrown system. We were finding kind of taking down the site under load. So we switched to gravity forms pretty quickly when I started, just to kind of get things stable. And we could have stayed there, right? We could have kept iterating on that gravity forms built system that we had. But we want everything to be a block. We want everything to be under Gutenberg. So we built our quiz builder in Gutenberg. And to kind of give you an idea of how that works, this is a framework that we've kind of played around with to kind of great success. And I'm just calling it the controller block paradigm. So here we have one kind of parent level block, the controller. All it does is it stores some attributes. It doesn't really do anything, at least on the back end here. And it's just a way for us to contain inside blocks or inner blocks. And then within that, we have a kind of pages block that controls the pages, and a results block that controls the results. And then in each of these, you can insert, any of the core blocks, headings, images, whatever. But we also have a question block and then an answer block. And as you go through here, you just type out what the answer is or what the question is. You can set an image, question type, all these sort of things. This is way more visual than we had. And kind of what you build out here is what you see. I have a smaller example that I can kind of show you a little bit more of what's going on in the back end. For example, this quiz. This is a pretty simple quiz for us. This is what we call a knowledge quiz as opposed to typology quiz, meaning there are correct answers here. So as you go through, you just click the little smiley face to determine that's a correct answer or not correct answer. But then when we get down to the bottom here, I think this is the most exciting part, or the best example of block context is the results block. So here an editor can drop in all the different things that you might see in a results page. You scored X out of whatever, share your score. You can build out some horizontal bar chart blocks that we've built out, all this sort of stuff. And then we have kind of a general response table block. And let me just run through this quiz real quick and show you how that works. So when you hit the quiz, at first what we do is on the back end in PHP, we're pulling out all of the question and the answer blocks, and we're formatting that out so that you get the correct kind of layout. Just none of these are going to be right. I'm going to get a terrible score, but just click through some of these.
We're not here to judge.
Might have missed one. That's okay.
Won't be graded.
Okay. So then you submit your quiz. And when you submit the quiz, we store your results as an archetype rather than each individual entry. So we say, here's all the possible combinations of answers. Here's what you gave. Let's store that. That way, the next person that gives that possible combination answers, we're not duplicating database space for no reason. We just store that archetype of answers. When you hit the quiz page again with URL rewrite here for this archetype query var, we go to the database, we grab that. Then through block context, we pass that through the controller block as your score. So that means that all of the blocks put in the results block grab that context from the controller block, what the score is, and they can change accordingly. Maybe the bar chart changes to match what your score is. This thing changes to whatever your score is. And then, of course, the table response goes through and it gets the database entry and returns all this stuff through block context to the table block. So that was really exciting for us. That kind of proved out the concept that we could do interactive things. We could build out little mini web apps basically for users, and they could interact with them, and we could construct a data model around that. So that's our quizzes. What else do I have for you?
Those are pretty neat, yeah.
Chart builder. This is definitely one of the more exciting things we've been working on lately. We launched this in the spring, and it's kind of a twofold project for us. One, there's the backend charting library, and then there is the WordPress plugin part of it. Let me let this load again. As I mentioned, we have 3 developers on our team. One other developer is kind of working with me on all this stuff. This is from one of our other developers, Ben Wilmerald. He spearheaded this project, and it kind of came out just fantastic. Not only did we gain the ability for editors to come in and make charts, but using the Gutenberg PHP API, we are using this in a more static database, which I'll show you in a moment, to generate charts for that. So it provides us kind of one endpoint for accessing charts and creating charts. So it starts off with a table. This one has like a lot of data. It's just an example I threw together. We're using block transforms here, so we can target the table block and say,
you are using everything.
We are. We're using the whole kitchen sink.
It's amazing. Yep. This is really, really cool.
So you can start off with a chart builder block, and that'll have a table in there, and you can fill out that info, or you can just start out with a table and convert that to a chart. So I'll do that now. So once again, kind of the concept here is you have a controller block, the chart builder controller. You have your table for your data. And then if we come down to the bottom here, you've got your chart. And as you edit data, let me just see if I can kind of change this. You'll see that this stuff updates in real time, which is fantastic. And then in the chart itself, you know, oops, I think this data is not formatted for that. You can customize pretty much all the visual aspects, spacing, what type of chart it is, colors, et cetera, et cetera. Let me let this load again one more time.
The fun of live demos.
Isn't it? Isn't it great?
I was doing something the other day where I was like, let me make this really dramatic, and then it broke, and I was like, got it. Okay, cool. I found the edge.
And Seth, this is independent of whatever charting library you want to use, correct?
That's correct. Yeah. I spoke about this in the thread that I posted to Twitter. Some people were asking questions about it, and we do intend to open source the block at some point. So, you know, you'll gain the ability to convert tables to charts and then pick all your different settings that you might have. But it will be up to you to create the middleware to link that to your own charting library. We won't be open sourcing our charting library. Let me just see. I mean, we have a lot of options here. I'm not going to go through all of these. Let me just kind of tweak some of the visual stuff for better effect. So you can kind of tweak this however you want. We're also using the resizing component so that you could kind of do that visually in real time if you'd like. You can go in and you know, give this title, test charts, or a subtitle, whatever you want. So that's Chart Builder. There's a lot more complex things you can do with it. This is a very simple chart to give you an idea of, once again, our kind of whole block process. Let me just go to this page real quick. This is a database that we run. It's very exhaustive, called the Religious Landscape Study. It has a lot of information about all the various religious groups in the United States, populations, things like this. In those, we have a lot of charts. Maps are not part of it yet, but all of these charts, all the bar charts, pie charts, and things like that, you might see that in this product are actually rendering out a block via PHP. So this is just the chart builder block being manually rendered through PHP on the back end. That way, any updates we make to chart builder for editors also get applied here to this product. I think that's another important part to make about Gutenberg, is that it's not just in the Gutenberg editor. Anything you make there, any block you make there, you can also do in PHP. And I think that's kind of important for maybe the PHP only developers in the WordPress community to know, is that you can, this doesn't have to be just a JavaScript only thing. You can utilize this using PHP as well. So that's Chart Builder. I think that's all the demos I have for right now. I do have a repo I was going to share of some of the modifications that we've done to core blocks. So I'd like to walk through those real quick. Let me just pull open a post, because I think that's probably the best example of this.
I would just add one thing on Chart Builder. Like, since we do so many charts, it's unlikely that we're going to do all of our charts using Chart Builder. But for, you know, really custom lead charts or these data-driven acts like Seth just showed, it's really fantastic. And we'd like to be able to use more of it, you know, when it's appropriate for the content. So
yeah, no, not every chart will be this. That's right. Yeah, sometimes you know, sometimes it's just a fidelity that you get with a static chart that we just can't achieve. And I don't know that we'd ever be able to achieve in some sort of WYSIWYG drag and drop builder. So this is an example of a post for us. Once again, what you see here is what you get. This is another block that we built out, the collapsible block. We use these at the top of all of our posts. What else was I going to show about that? Let this load. One of the other things that we had to build out with Gutenberg, one of the other things that Gutenberg gives you is, I think, a great UI library that we've never really had in WordPress with WordPress components. and with kind of inspector controls and advanced panels and stuff like this. So another part of our Gutenberg journey was not just the blocks, but how are we going to utilize this editor to its fullest extent for our publishing platform? And part of that is we've built out some kind of controls for the stuff that you might see here in the sidebar. So the report PDF, top line promo, you can change these things around, you can drag and drop them just in a more visual way than you were able to before. In the past, we used advanced custom fields for all this sort of stuff. And that was great and all, but once again, there was only so much you could do to customize how that looked, how it worked. It kind of had to fit in that ACF framework. But here we're given all the tools by Gutenberg through components to build out exactly what we want. One of the things here is this is a block. The table of contents is a block that's being rendered out in PHP on the back end. What that also means is that if you build out like an essay or something and you want to throw a table of contents in, you can just throw the table of contents block in the editor. But one of the core customizations that we had to do, we've done a number, is add support to the heading block to support our table of contents block. So when you're going through here, let's go to, well, actually, this is using an older version of that block, not a good example, but I'll change it out. When you're going through here, you can type in a heading block, right? And we've added a little icon. Not much is going on here. We've just added, we've added one attribute called isChapter, and then we've added an icon to toggle that on or off. So I'm going to toggle that on. And then this might freak out because of the variety of blocks from this older post. And it didn't show up, but each of these is one of our older blocks called the chapter block. Another thing we had to build up before we could figure out how we were going to hook into core blocks. The way that works is, this is a high level. I'll share this link in the chat so people can take a look at these examples. I've got two examples here. One is how we've added chapter support to headings and how we've added a alternate mobile background for the cover block. So that when you're on mobile, maybe you get a different sized image for your cover block than you might get on desktop. So the heading block is kind of comprised of two things, obviously. One is using the PHP API that Gutenberg affords, is adding an attribute in. It can be very easy to do. You can just use the block type metadata filter to change a lot of things, but specifically you can splice in new attributes. In this case is chapter, which is just a Boolean, yes or no. And then you can affect the rendering of it using the render block filter. We're doing this in a lot of places with the core blocks. We say, if you do have the chapter attribute and it's true, then we just add a little data attribute to the H element. So that's a very simple example. People can take a look at this and use this. Another part of that obviously is the actual little toolbar icon itself. Once again, this is pretty simple too, using the filters, the JavaScript filters in Gutenberg. So you kind of intercept the editing block. You say, hey, if this isn't the heading block, just give what was already there. Otherwise, we put in a little toolbar button and you click it, sets the attribute or unsets it. And then we also have a variation, which I kind of alluded to. We use variations a lot as shortcuts. So you could just type in /chapter if you wanted to, and that would insert a heading with the chapter already selected. So it's pretty easy to actually take a core block and give it completely new functionality that it didn't have before, which I think is great. And we're trying to get more of our stuff into using core blocks. I don't have any examples of this, but probably our most modified core block is the group block. We've added the ability to make it sticky so that a group will stick to the top of the page as you scroll. We've added the ability to set a responsive threshold. And when you reach that threshold, then it will move itself to this div or this ID or something like that, so that editors can kind of change things around the page based on whether you're on mobile or not. The other example is in the cover block. we are adding another media field, or actually, I guess more of an ID field, so that you can associate an image ID so that when you go to mobile, the cover block will use a different version of the image. Same thing here, kind of intercept the block edit. You say if you're not the cover, just go ahead and return what you're doing. Otherwise, we have a little panel that we insert into the editor and a component that we've written. It's a riff on a variety of different things in core for a drop zone for media. That's also in this example if people want to use it. On the back end, it's pretty simple here too. We're using Jetpack as mobile to detect if someone's on mobile. And if so, we get the image ID and splice it in, replace the image with that. So these are pretty easy, simple core block customizations. But I think if people dive in here, they might kind of get a feel for what is possible for taking core blocks and making your own block library out of that, basically. Yeah, so.
Thanks so much for putting that in GitHub too.
Yeah, no problem, no problem.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Also, just one last thing, this is a story item block being rendered out in PHP. This is actually one of those full site editing template block areas I told you about before. So we kind of have something at the end of our sidebar. We have a little block area there that people can go into Gutenberg and drop this stuff out. Michael manages this most popular list using a reusable block so that it can show up on the homepage or the sidebar or anywhere else, and we edit it in one place and it edits everywhere. Yeah, so I think that's all for my demos today.
Yeah, we use reusable blocks in a couple different contexts. They're
oh yeah, we use them at the end of posts as well for various promos, newsletter signups, this sort of things.
This was an awesome demonstration. Thank you so much. And I'm totally thrilled that you brought some code examples that we can share with the developers that are watching, and also maybe come back to in the recorded version and want to follow up on some of the things.
Sure.
Yeah. So what are our first questions here?
I was going to say, I'm like itching to ask a bunch of questions.
Go ahead.
Yeah, can I jump in? I want to first
absolutely.
drop this GitHub issue in that I think will be of interest. This is like hyper practical, but just around allowing usage of block-based template parts without actually accessing the whole template. A lot of what you're describing with the taxonomy pages feels very similar to that, where you could create template areas and then have access to just edit those. So that's something to really look forward to. And I see as a huge way. I've heard from a lot of different agencies and organizations that that's what they'd love to have access to. It's like, we can define a template area and just allow people to edit that. That would be huge, rather than opening up the whole gamut. So I wanted to put that out there, and I definitely think you could have some really cool insights in helping shape this going forward. So I want to encourage you, like, bring all your insights and all your experience of like maybe what has tripped up users or what features you want to see.
Oh, absolutely.
All that good stuff. Yeah. And I'd love to go back to like the original why WordPress? Like, was it part of wanting to rely on the open web? Was it what made you want to adopt Gutenberg? Is that also related to like data consistency over time and not need to migrate stuff? Like, I'm very curious with all the work that you do and the value you bring.
Sure. I think I could touch on the why Gutenberg stuff real quick, and I think maybe Michael can touch on like the why WordPress stuff. I'm sure that the audience here knows why WordPress. We're all fans of it, but on the why Gutenberg front, I think there was just kind of, I don't know, kismet that we were looking to redo these topic pages. We were looking to make all these kind of big editorial changes to the site. And the question was, how are we going to manage all this? How are people going to slot in these different stories to these templates and so on and so forth? And I think I had gone to WordCamp for Publishers. It's in Chicago a couple years back. And I really didn't know much about Gutenberg. I knew it was coming and I really hadn't tried it out. I think I was resistant to it. Like, I think a lot of WordPress devs were, and part of the reason I made the thread, because I think some people still are, because it really is a complete sea change for WordPress. I'm a self-taught WordPress developer, and I'm only a self-taught WordPress developer because when I started in WordPress, there were frameworks, there were guidelines, coding standards, there was the WordPress way to do things. And so that made it easy to get in. And now we're dealing with something entirely new and a completely new paradigm with blocks. And so, you know, the guidelines aren't there yet. The frameworks aren't there yet. The Gutenberg way isn't really well defined yet. And I'm hoping that what we show here and kind of what we give back to the community in the next couple of months was, as we open source more of this stuff and review more code, is we can kind of help shape what is the Gutenberg way of doing things. It was kind of just fortuitous that we stumbled upon it at the right time.
Yeah, and going back to the earlier times, as I mentioned, when I got here, we were running every different type of CMS except for WordPress. And actually Russell and I at the time sort of did an analysis, and kudos to Russell too, because he was really sort of, you know, pushed me in this direction. But it was open web was part of it. You know, we liked the open source ethos. We liked the fact that, you know, we weren't getting charged like a per user license, you know, or anything like that. So it was a lot of it was, you know, commitment to open source. And it really was, I think, a really smart decision for us, and it got us into the WordPress ecosystem. And then when Russell moved on, and I was looking, you know, for a new developer, you know, the community was really strong, and you know, we were able to find Seth, and it just has always been a good fit for us. And one thing on the Gutenberg thing, I think Seth has been really great about. We don't try to swallow the ocean at one time. You know, we like as you pointed out, we just try to do that. We dealt with the topic pages first, and we roll out like one little component of this thing, you know, to this one little portion of our site. And like as he mentioned, we're about to bring a Medium blog in-house, and I think that's going to be the first time we do take our next big step with this full site editing. So, you know, really doing it incrementally is, I think, a really smart product, you know, ethos for us. So that's how it's worked great for us. So.
That's really neat. It's amazing to hear about kind of both historically and just kind of at the right time and working for publishers. Folks should definitely check them out. I think 2 years ago went and talked to them about full site editing, like in the early days. So it's neat to hear them mentioned as kind of a way in. I'm curious too, because I know some folks have, I was talking to someone else this week who's from agency land, and how much workflow has changed as people have adopted Gutenberg. I'm curious if that is the case with editors or people you're working with, where it's both a technology change and a workflow change. And that's the piece that I think often gets overlooked, is people just talk about the technological change and need to, you know, do things like learn JavaScript deeply or dig into blocks. But then I think there's also a very real organizational weight of how do you train people up in this new way, or potentially have design look at things after the fact or before, and kind of switching around the workflow. So I'd be curious to know what that's been like.
One thing I actually think, to be candid, I think that's an area was sort of making sure that everybody's on the same page is an area where we're always striving to do better. You know, there is this tension between, you know, innovation and making sure that your editors understand what's going on. I'm sure they would probably +1 on this, you know, so I would say that it's not something that we've really completely, you know, we've really solved the problem. And I think it's common in most organizations, you know, so
you're definitely not alone there.
Yeah. I think it's one thing I think we aspire to is sort of, you know, doing a better job at making sure that everybody's, you know, up to speed as we roll stuff out. But I think, you know, we do what we can. So Seth, you want to add to that? Or?
Yeah, no, I think that is still kind of a struggle for us, for anyone. I was listening to a Gutenberg podcast. I might have been Gutenberg changelog or something like that a while back, and there was some guest on. I think he was like the head of Florida State's web properties or something, and he had mentioned that what they did when they brought on Gutenberg was they recorded a bunch of videos and snuck it into the help menu. And I thought that was really clever, and that's something that we're going to look to do by the end of the year too. It has been a struggle to get people to kind of understand Gutenberg, not just the editor interface, but the concept of blocks and inner blocks and how they all kind of nest together and stuff like that. We have a lot of blocks, and we've tried a bunch of different ideas as far as interface and how you interact with these things. And I think we're finally kind of settling on a good practice. You know, we try to keep things in the block toolbar if you need them a lot. Otherwise, we kind of hide them away in panels. You know, there's a fine line of like, when to use a block style, when should that just be like a toggle on an attribute or something. that stuff's hard to figure out. And I don't know that anyone has the right answer yet, but we're trying.
Yeah. So we have one question from Matt Radford, and I think it touches on that. How do you find content editors with reusable blocks? When I've exposed them, he writes, to users before, the idea that it was a global element they were inserting and changing rather than something they thought they would be duplicating caused issues.
Yeah, it has caused issues. We had, I think there's a lot of confusion about the difference between a reusable block and a block pattern. I know there's a ticket. It's been pretty active the last couple of days, actually, on exploring the interface for that. I think it looks like it's heading in the right direction to me. I'm pretty excited to see if this makes it into the plugin soon. But it's been a problem because, someone will drop in a reusable block thinking that this is like a block template. And they'll edit something. And maybe that something was a post ID attribute that told that block specific information about that post. And now every single post that was using that block is referencing that one thing. That's been a problem for us. So getting people to use block patterns, I think, is been harder to do. People kind of like instinctively go to the reusable blocks. I'm not sure why. Maybe it's a little bit easier to surface, but it has been a problem.
Yeah, it was also the first concept for almost 3 years.
Oh, right. We didn't even have patterns. Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's really it's a UX issue, right, on the admin side and communicating to the end user what you're doing. Yeah, I agree with Seth. It's something where we haven't really licked, and so and yeah.
Yeah, and
I'll note. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, one of the things that I'm really looking forward to tied to this is block locking and adding the ability to disable editing and block locking specifically for the reusable block. This was actually looked into for 6.0. and did not make the cut, but it is something that is on the mind because this is something that has come up a lot in the community, is the reusable block being able to edit in a way that is more intuitive. And this is also where I think I saw you all using some block locking whenever you're going through the demos, which is very neat. So I'm excited to see that system expand, but we have to make it intuitive for editors too. So if you limit options, it needs to make sense. And I liked how you were doing that with some of the options with the custom blocks that you have going already, with pick different headers and different image sizes. And there's a lot of interesting work being done there.
Yeah, we're using block locking in some situations. We're also, I have found it's useful if you're making kind of a custom block that has like a lot of inner blocks, is you can kind of set the template, lock that, but unlock maybe some of the inner blocks that you want people to edit. And I think that's worked out pretty well, actually, to kind of funnel people into how you want people to use this block. They click on it, oh, I can't change that,
Yeah, and there is something that just with the 13.7 version of Gutenberg plugin, you can now with one toggle actually lock all the inner blocks as well, so you don't have to go from block to block to block. But I'm now kind of thinking about reversing a test for that to say, okay, what happens if I want to edit just one block? What do I have to do? And if that lock works, it's kind of the QA person in me kind of saying, let's see if we can go back to the original idea. So, but I wanted to go back to two things. Well, it's actually one thing, but so there is this whole 10 years big, great plugins that helped out a lot of people, millions of developers. There was one is Gravity Forms, and the other one is ACF, Advanced Custom Fields. And you said you were using them, but then kind of moved away from it. Can you dive in that a little bit more?
Sure. And no shade to those plugins. I mean, Gravity Forms is phenomenal, as is Advanced Custom Fields. I mean, I don't know where we would have been without ACF years ago, honestly, because, I think the broader, hey, WordPress needs like a Fields API stuff, it stuttered out after a while, and really no movement happened there because Gutenberg was coming. And ACF was great. So mad props to Elliot Condon, and I guess Delicious Brains now owns them. I don't know.
They're sold to the WP Engine now.
Oh, okay. Wow. Yeah. So we stuck with ACF for a while into our Gutenberg transition. I think we have a few locations where it's still being used. Taxonomy term edit page, we're still using ACF for some fields there. But it just made sense that for all of the stuff that was in the editor screen, when you're actually editing a post or something, to go all in on Gutenberg. That's the whole point of, what we're doing. We're going all in on Gutenberg. We have this UI library with WordPress components, and it felt like a shame not to use it. So a lot of the almost all the stuff that originally was in ACF report materials, I showed you that in the block sidebar, table of contents, child posts. We do a lot of reports, so we have one post and we'll associate other posts as a child of that, so that they appear in kind of the information architecture correctly. That's now all happening using WordPress components and REST API and stuff like that. So there was no reason not to use ACF. There was no reason not to use Gravity Forms. It was just a matter of, long term, we have to maintain these things. Everything you have to maintain, and it's better, I think, if we're all in on Gutenberg and the concept of blocks to handle all that stuff.
Well, thank you. So with ACF, moving away from I'm kind of thinking about, you would need to build a block about that, and then with the block came the interfaces for the inspector control on the right-hand side of the sidebar.
Yeah.
All right. Do we have any more questions from the audience? And do you have more questions?
I feel like I always have more questions. I'm curious, what's your wish list?
2 minutes.
Another 2 minutes. Do you have anything that's on your mind where maybe it's really out there, but either current pain points or wish list items far into the future? I'd be curious.
I think a lot of them center around full site editing, and I haven't gone, deep into full site editing yet. That's happening next month. As Michael said, we have a new subsite we're launching. So we're going to use that as an opportunity to learn about block themes and full site editing. I think if there's one kind of wish that I would have, it is that on the PHP side of things, of core blocks, there were more filters. The query block is a good example of this. You kind of have to intercept the whole thing. If you want to modify it, you kind of have to intercept the whole post template block and the WP query there, which we are doing, unfortunately. I would love it if, you could just tap into the query arguments before they're sent to WP query and the query loop block and modify things. So I think, probably even more PHP APIs and more endpoints that we can access through PHP would be my top wish list. I think on the JavaScript side thing, whatever you want to change is there. It's pretty easy to do. That's probably my biggest thing.
I dropped in an issue if you want to. I think it's related to kind of what you're talking about, because this is also, I've heard from a lot of agency folks that they tend to hack apart the query block and extend it for their own purposes. So it'd be neat to kind of gather what those main requests are, see what's going on, and see what can evolve from there, what's missing. So that's a great one. It's a good call out.
So there is JavaScript drawings. There is one change coming. I don't know if it will really affect you, but it is on the components. They are all now refactored with TypeScript, and I think it's a big project. Nice. So to increase the developer experience, because TypeScript, then your IDE kind of taps into that and helps you with the types of and the parameters and everything. So I just wanted to tell you this is coming. And
that'll be great. We use many years ago now, we kind of settled on semantic UI as kind of a way to bootstrap our theme redevelopment efforts. We were standardizing everything under one parent theme, and we went with semantic UI, and they have a great React set of components. I actually think Microsoft hired the guy who made that to lead their TypeScript team because they're so good. So yeah, getting all those hints and stuff while you're typing out those components is great. So I look forward to that.
All right. Okay. So I think that's all the time we had. It has been very, very interesting and totally inspiring to kind of think a little bit beyond what normal websites do, especially in the news side. So at this point, I only have 2 more questions to all 3 of you. So are there any announcements that you have and couldn't get into because we were talking other things. And the other thing is when people want to get in touch with you, how could they, what's the best way? Michael, do you want to start?
I would just say I don't really have any announcements, but if you want to get in touch with me, you can email me mpiccorossi@pewresearch.org. You can hit me up on Twitter. Those are the two ways to. If you can figure out how to spell my name from Twitter, then you can my last name at Pew Research. You can get to me. So, thank you for having us. It's really been enjoyable.
Wonderful, wonderful. Seth?
You can get a hold of me on Twitter, LinkedIn, wherever. I have links on my GitHub profile if you're interested in getting in touch with me. That link for that repo is in the chat, so you can find that there. And yeah, thank you for having us. It's great to show kind of what we've built. We're very proud of it. We think we've built a pretty rock solid Gutenberg, news publishing system, and it's cool to show it off.
And
I'll close this off. I am just going to plug the latest call for testing for the Full Setting Outreach Program. I have to. So if you're interested in the stuff and kind of whatever stage you are in, whether you're deep in the customizations and Gutenberg first, like these folks are, or if you're scared to adopt, like feedback on all this stuff and what would make it easier is really helpful. There's a whole outreach program designed to bring that stuff in, and I would love to hear about the blockers. So I just want to nudge that. Otherwise, I am not really on social media. So LinkedIn, I don't know if that counts as social media, but I'm on LinkedIn, and you can also find me at nomad.blog. There's a contact form, and I welcome people to use it.
And for those who are on the WordPress Slack, it's Anne Zazou on the WordPress Slack. And my name, Birgit Pauli-Haack, BPH on Twitter, on Slack, and also Pauli@gutenbergtimes.com. So I don't have an announcement either. But it just my brain is kind of really full of these great demos, and I'm gonna watch this probably quite a few times again. Speaking about recording, it will be after YouTube is through the rendering, it will be on YouTube on our Gutenberg Times channel. And a big thank you to the viewers and to our panelists. It was fabulous, and it's wonderful to see that. And I know there are quite a few developers on the Gutenberg team or on around that are going to look for that, especially also digital strategists like Michael, to kind of what is really possible. I think you're really, really on the forefront on the I'm not allowed to say that, so I'm saying the leading edge of the Gutenberg development. So thank you so much. If everybody had, if you have questions or so, send me to pauli@gutenbergtimes.com. Thanks everybody, and bye-bye. And let's get out of here. Thank you. Bye-bye.